In this video, I race in the rain in iRacing in VR using the Quest 3 and the 4070Super and ask that feared question, does it tank my FPS? And all from an older gamer's perspective. Before I get into this week's video, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who has subscribed to this channel. Earlier this week, it ran past the 1,000 subscribers mark, which is a wonderful incentive to me. It means a lot to me, it really does, that people, you viewers watching this right now, are prepared to take a chance on my older gamer's perspective and subscribe to me. It encourages me to create more content and push this channel towards greater heights. I will do a live stream soon to tell you about the plans I have for the future videos. I will also look at how much I've earned from your videos now that I have passed the magical 1,000 subscriber point. Partly to show you how much I plan to reinvest into sim racing and VR videos, and also for anyone else who's interested in creating a sim racing channel and wants to know how much they can possibly earn from their endeavors. But that's in the near future, hopefully in the next few weeks. Right now, we race in the rain. Introduced in Season 2 of 2024, the long-awaited Tempest weather system adds rain to iRacing. And the question on everyone's mind is, how much FPS does it steal doing its water weathery thing when you race in VR? For those that haven't seen my previous test videos, I am using an Intel 13600K with 64 gig of RAM on Windows 11, which is on an NVMe, and iRacing is on a separate NVMe. The graphics are handled by the new 4070Super, and my VR headset is a Quest 3, which I link to my PC with a USB-C cable. The Meta PC app is set to 90Hz, and the slider is maxed out at 1.7, and the Oculus debug tool has these modest settings. Inside iRacing, I have the eye candy set relatively high because I enjoyed that level of visual immersion. With these settings in a standard 12-car AI race at somewhere like Alton Park, I usually see a performance headroom of around 35 to 40%, with the frames per second giving a fairly solid 90 FPS, with the occasional dip to 89, which is something I rarely notice. But what does the Tempest weather system do to this fairly solid 90 FPS? Let's find out. Performance headroom in the rain. There are 5 degrees of rain: very light, light, moderate, heavy, and very heavy, which when setting up an AI race session can be found in the race panel itself. It is possible to add more than one of these degrees of rain to a race, but for these tests I'm going to use just one rain type per test session. There is also a separate graphical setting for rain, actually found inside the iRacing graphical tab called SSR, Screen Space Reflections, which adds a higher level of FPS degradation to the sim than just adding rain. But I will deal with that later in this video. Here are all the rain settings running next to each other using a track and a car that supports rain, in this case the F1600 at Alton Park. No rain is far left, with very light, light, moderate, heavy and very heavy displayed as you see here. The first thing you can note, at least on my system with a 13600K and a 4070Super, is the actual FPS hit is not as extreme as perhaps we all thought it would be. Mostly, as you can see here, it evens out, with this snapshot near the start of the race showing a performance headroom of 34% for no rain on the far left, and with a fall off to about 11% by the time we get to heavy rain on the far right, which is, whatever way you look at it, a significant performance headroom drop, but there are no actual frames dropped. That's the important thing. The system is still very stable at 90 FPS, which is more than I can say for my car. A big contributing factor for performance fall-off appears to be the amount of spray you see on the track as you race. So if you're going down a fast straight at the start of the race with a lot of cars in front of you, causing a lot of spray in your face, there is going to be a bigger drop in performance than, say, if you're on your own on the same track in those same conditions. But even with a huge amount of spray, to the point where sometimes I couldn't even see where I was going, I still didn't actually see any frames dropping below 90 FPS, with the exception of the occasional drop to 89 FPS, which, as I said earlier, is perfectly normal. And remember, I haven't changed any of my iRacing settings, or my Meta app, or my ODT settings. These are the exact same settings I have been using on dry tracks all this time. Nothing different about rain. So that's good news, right? Rain is obviously very usable and not nearly as big a hit to system performance as we all feared. But what happens when SSR is turned on? Combining SSR with rain. Well, this is what it looks like when screen space reflection, which sort of enhances the way puddles reflect light and other stuff, is set to low with very light rain on the left and heavy rain on the right. And yeah, this is pretty bad, with my frame rate suddenly cut in half to 45 FPS, even though ASW is set to off. And the performance headroom is, in both versions, dragging itself along at basement level. Heavy rain, possibly a sub-basement level. When SSR is set to high, things get even worse. And basically, iRacing becomes unplayable. Think of SSR being the equivalent of any shadow settings you have in any sim you have ever used, and you will understand that this setting is only to be used by people who have very powerful systems. I mean, we are talking 4090 at least to be able to cope with rain using SSR in VR. I think if you are using monitors or even triples, you might be able to get away with it, even using a lesser godlike graphics card than the 4090. But I don't think your performance will be that much better, to be honest with you. I didn't really see a massive difference in VR between SSR off and SSR set to either high or low. So unless you have a pressing need to have all of your settings turned up to the max, I would advise leaving SSR off. Using OpenXR with rain. I am, admittedly, a little late to the OpenXR party, having only recently converted to using this system pretty much all the time. If you want to know more about that, I have another video where I detail the advantages of using OpenXR with the OpenXR toolkit. I will link that below. But needless to say, it does give a performance boost, even in the rain, particularly when I used fixed foveated rendering set to a preset with the cull outer mask as yes, the mode set to performance, and pattern was set to balanced. This creates a masking effect inside the headset and effectively reduces the number of pixels that need to be rendered by the 4070Super and sent to the Quest 3. Think of it as a more elegant version, if you will, of FOV tangent multiplier that I covered in a recent video using the Oculus debug tool. I'll also link that below. It creates this sort of crude mask, which I managed to capture using the PC overlay display. But I would say that I've never really seen this mask in the headset, and only occasionally do I see it in recordings. Here you can see using the OpenXR toolkit, again left to right, with no rain on the far left and heavy rain on the far right. No rain is displaying at, again, 39%, and this is falling off to 27% when encountering heavy rain. Compare that OpenXR using the mask created with the toolkit to the standard way of accessing the game using the what I'll call the Oculus option. And you can see there are some modest performance gains to be had from using OpenXR with the toolkit. It's not massive, but you never know when that small percentage will make a key difference to your racing experience. Conclusions. So there you have it. Rain is here, and presumably it will be rolled out across more cars and more tracks as we progress through this year. But there is not as much to fear as we initially thought. Yes, there is a performance hit, and this will be bigger with larger races when the spray is really out of control. And it may be that some races with 30 or 40 cars might prove to be challenging if you have a graphics card that is already struggling with dry tracks. But if you have something that is getting about 35 to 45% on a dry track for performance headroom, with many of the settings turned all the way up, then you will probably be okay. Although you will be even better if you use the FOV tangent multiplier in the ODT or the foveated rendering settings in the OpenXR toolkit. Either way, it seems as though our biggest fears of rain in iRacing tanking all but the super systems were unfounded, and rain is something we can all enjoy, even those on a lesser system. If you are on a lesser system and you really don't want to turn down the eye candy, then a surefire way to reduce the load and increase performance headroom is simply to reduce the refresh rate from 90 to 72 Hz. This is a capture at 72 Hz with dry on the far left and heavy rain on the far right, with all the other rain types in between. Now, if I bring in the 90 Hz version of the test, you can see there is a clear performance advantage when running at 72 Hz. The difference becomes even more apparent when SSR is used, either at low or high, as shown here. And while we saw at 90 Hz the frame rate was cut in half to 45 frames per second, here at 72 Hz the chosen frame rate of 72 frames per second is maintained throughout. Sure, the performance headroom here is nothing to shout home about, and if you're on a crowded grid on a complex track, this is likely to sink even further and take the FPS with it. But for less intense examples, 72 Hz does allow you to drive in the rain and keep your eye candy set to beautiful. I know this is not always a popular option, and it really depends on what you favor, higher refresh rate or a higher graphic fidelity. Sometimes you just can't have both, but at least you now know that you have the option, even if you don't care to take it. What do you think? What type of graphics card do you have, and what sort of performance are you seeing when you are racing in the rain? Leave a comment below. Excuse me for being a bit throaty in this video. I'm getting over a cold and it's left me a little hoarse. Nevertheless, I hope you found this video helpful, and until the next one, race clean, and I'll see you on a possibly damp track.
We can't fix the damage. I'm afraid it's over.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button, and if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.